The magic of Doctor Who is nothing is what it appears to be. The police box is not a police box. The Doctor is not an old human being. Susan is not a school child. Running through Doctor Who is the thing is, look at life. There's more to life than you think. Life is not straightforward. To get the most out of life, you need to dig a bit deeper. So I think that's part of the magic of it.
It's time for Type 40. Your life. It's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who pod. I'm going to do that again. Oh, God, that was going so well. Oh, it's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network, with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, designated driver, mouth runner, but probably fandom's slowest binge watcher. Here's where we deliver Doctor Who conversation, facts, views, banter, and whatever else comes out now in the 60th anniversary year on our free-speaking, big-thinking, eclectic show for everyone. That's whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to the ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We talk about it all on this show. All views are encouraged, and there could even be a few laughs along the way. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40. At last, the time, everybody, is now. The Diamond Anniversary, it's on. And I wonder, is it too early to start celebrating? I've got the perfect person to ask, come to think of it. We're going to bring on our guest in a couple of minutes, but I think that Simon Horton, of all the people I know, he's the one that's most likely to have started celebrating already.
Well, hello, everybody. Have I started celebrating? Well, yeah, I guess I have. Isn't it funny how the 60th year is finally here? And we're kind of getting used to these celebrations now. It literally only seems like 5 minutes ago that I was sitting in a cinema watching the 50th anniversary special, and here we are 10 years later. I was like, where did the time go to? So you know, we Doctor Who fans, we like to celebrate, don't we? We like those celebrations ever since the 10th anniversary, really, with the three Doctors, which I remember watching on TV at the time. And we just love a celebration. We love to mark it, don't we? That's just how we are. So yeah, I've started celebrating. Of course I have.
I suppose if if they hadn't have taken that decision to broadcast the Three Doctors, it might have been a completely different kettle of fish by now, because that idea of legacy may not have set in, and anniversaries may not have been something that it would have been deemed not appropriate, but not necessary to mark on a show that was still predominantly aimed at kids.
Yeah, it's very possible, isn't it? You know, we've got Barry Letts and Terence Dicks to thank for that. And if they hadn't done that, would we be marking anniversaries in quite the same way? Possibly not. No, maybe not.
See, there's no one that I know, Simon, that's more passionate about getting as much Doctor Who in front of people's eyes in retelling those enduring stories from the classic era in particular. You know, all the efforts of people like David Whittaker, Donald Cotton, Terence Dicks, Barry Letts, Robert Holmes, Christopher Bailey, and everybody else, stretching right up to Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat, Jamie Matheson, everyone. There's no one who's more for getting as much of it out there in as many formats as we can than you. You really believe in the power of these stories, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. As I've always said, Doctor Who is far more than just a TV program, which is why I get really annoyed when people say, why do you take this so seriously? It's only a TV program. No. This is not only a TV program. It's anything but. For people like us, it is, let's be brutally honest, it is a way of life, isn't it? It is for me. Surely it is for you as well, Dan.
I think so. I think that I believe this show, seriously, I think this show, in fact, I know it saves lives.
Yeah.
I know that it informs people in a moral sense sometimes. It's an escape from the everyday. It's a companion to their lives, and something that people do together. I mean, even now, in an age where everybody's got a screen in their pocket on a smartphone or a tablet or whatever else, still I think there's a kind of shared viewing experience to Doctor Who, and all the iconography. And it speaks for itself, really. Outside of any actor, and certainly any member of any production team that's associated with it. I mean, recently we had some photographs, didn't we, of the show out being filmed, you know, just up a hillside somewhere in Northumberland, I think it was, and no, in North Pembrokeshire, that's where it was. And no actors had even appeared on this hillside, but as soon as that TARDIS prop was in place, there was Gareth Davies and many other photographers were out there slapping away, because it's an important cultural milestone. And so it's even more curious, really, when you look at that in context, and you realize that there's no singular location where the nostalgic, the curious, or the addicted like us can go, even in the streaming age that we're in now. And we can sort of veg out, keep one finger on the hoofa doofa, and motor through all of Doctor Who history. I think that's a really curious thing that stands out in the 21st century.
Well, I mean, yeah, truth be told, of course, I have digested my Doctor Who over the years in bits and chunks. You know, I came to Doctor Who in 1972, 1971-72 with season 8, when I was about 3 or 4. And then, of course, I watched it religiously right the way through to the end. But then as time went on, midway through the 80s, I started to then access stuff that I'd never seen before on VHS, the Seeds of Death, the Daleks, all that kind of stuff, that suddenly the black and white stuff that started to come out. There was the Five Faces season in 1981 that dipped into the series past as well. So I've dipped in very much the same way that the TARDIS works. I've dipped in and out of history along the route. And taken little pockets of it and watched bits and pieces there, an odd episode here, a whole story there. And so I've certainly never sat and sort of watched from an unearthly child up to date. Something I've never, ever done.
It was like putting a puzzle together, wasn't it? It was like subscribing to a part work, but you'd get it out of order.
Yeah.
So VHS tapes, or how you'd catch it on UK.
Or even Target books that you've been reading. Target books, obviously, by Terence Dicks and others, that of stories that you would never see in your entire life, let alone even with some of the stuff we can watch now. Other stuff, Marco Polo, for example, we simply can't ever see. And so those Target books were also a way into a show. And as you say, it was a puzzle. It was just putting all those blocks together and forming a whole in your mind of what Doctor Who was.
You know what I've never forgiven W.H. Allen for, as much as I love the target books, the numbering on the spines of the targets. That confused me. That confused me for years. But of course, we do have these streaming platforms now, and particularly the BBC has the iPlayer. And just in the last few weeks, Russell T Davies, the past and present showrunner of Doctor Who, he's hinted that every single episode of Doctor Who, the entire legacy, could well end up on BBC iPlayer. In fact, he seems pretty confident about it. But this is what he said exactly when speaking to the Sunday Times in early January. He said, you make all of the back catalogue available first on iPlayer. I can't swear that will happen, but there are contracts. It's our heritage. It deserves to be there so kids can fall in love with Doctor Who like they love Friends. I was really struck by that, because successive generations of kids now really latch on to the American sitcom Friends, which I think finished around 10 or 12 years ago. But because it's all there on Netflix and they can motor through it, it's got this big cultural relevance after nearly 30 years. It's not an unfair parallel to draw, is it? And to wonder, why isn't all of Doctor Who there or here or somewhere?
Well, it's something that has always amazed me. And as I've always said many, many times, the BBC have never understood what they've got with Doctor Who. And the fact that it isn't all available out there, I think, again, sort of speaks volumes with regards to that. They just don't understand the love that is out there for this show. And that everybody does want it to be as accessible as possible. It just is something, unlike, for example, an episode of EastEnders, it's something that you want to watch and rewatch again. And so, why is the BBC never made the whole block available? And now, in the 60th year, now would be the prime time, with streaming as popular as it is, to do it.
An ideal time and an ideal point, I think, to bring on our guest, lifelong Doctor Who fan, Andy Fairclough. He's joined us for this one. What do you think about this, Andy? Is it well past time that all of Doctor Who was available in exactly the same way that Russell says?
I think so, yes, with iPlayer, I'm not sure whether it's going to grab the kids. There's always a bit of a thing that the BBC and iPlayer and things, it's for older viewers. Kids are on Disney Plus and Netflix and everything else. But if it's going to go anywhere, it has to go on iPlayer, doesn't it? And it certainly makes it easier for those who are no doubt going to be engaged by what Russell's going to bring to the table. Millions of people back to Doctor Who, which is what we want. Then people will know where to go, and if they get curious, they could. The attention span, I don't know, the attention span of kids these days, the press of a button to be able to find a classic Tom Baker or something like that, it's got to be done, isn't it?
But also, there's always been that disgruntlement, hasn't there, amongst fandom, whereby we all kind of took the opinion of, hold on, we paid through our license fee to get these programs made in the first place. Why are we now having to pay to buy them back again, for example, on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray? So at least by putting them on the BBC platform of iPlayer, you are saying, look, okay, you did pay for these to be made, and so here they are. You get to see them again, which I think is the correct thing to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's high time, and it's a good time to do it. So
Perfect time for the 60th anniversary. We don't know what they've got in store. Maybe this will actually happen. I don't know. I think Russell T Davies has a way of, even though he is such a powerful figure in the TV industry, so respected, and a creative powerhouse too, he does seem to know how the general British public, not just Doctor Who fans, I think he understands us too, but I think he understands how the British public relate to entertainment and how realistic things are. I mean, in the same piece, he was talking about radical things like taking all the soap operas down to like 2 showings a week and things like that. You know, absolute heresy not that long ago. Yeah, can you imagine how well that went down? I mean, all those episodes, all those stories, all those seasons, you know, everything stretching back to 1963. You can understand why, realistically, if you want to eliminate the barriers between classic and new, and the all new that's coming up, make it as seamless, make it as effortless, take the work out of it for them, Andy. That's what I think.
Definitely, yeah. As I say, I think attention spans are fairly short these days. So if something can be done easily, it will be done. If it's too much trouble, a lot of people won't bother. So
Now, obviously, this can't happen soon enough in your case, because we know you're deep into, I think you're pretty deep into your challenge for the anniversary year already, aren't you? So this needs to have happened a little sooner to benefit you. But maybe they'll manage to do it by the time you get, I don't know, to a certain point. We're going to come to all that in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away on the device of your choice. If you know where to look, there's well over 100 now. Reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regulars and some pretty awesome guests. In fact, we know there's something for every fan over at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about that a little later on, as well as a couple of minutes where we will make contact with that matrix of all knowledge that we call the Fandom Podcast Network, for a word about all the other cult conversations going on across that family of podcasts over there. That's that all cleared up. Right. We can't conjure up every episode of Doctor Who on the iPlayer just like that, sadly, but we can get together with Andy here and compare notes on how he is revisiting the series' long history here and now on Type 40. That's coming up right now. Yeah, the long history of Doctor Who, available in one format or another for decades now. But yeah, just as you were saying, Simon, it was more a case of watching it all together. Those of a certain age, I'm not fond of that expression, but it does fit, have double or maybe even triple dipped on purchasing certainly the classic series at this point. But here we are in the digital age, just as Russell said there, and expectations are different, and so are viewing habits. The term intellectual property, as cold as it may sound to some of us, and the notion of franchise, it's kind of become a dirty word too. But in some ways, it's a good thing. It shows that, I think it shows that a property like Doctor Who has become something greater, has achieved this sort of greater relevance and a brand of almost immortality, I suppose, more than just a commodity. But where does that leave the cozy tea time feels of yesterday? Can those days in front of an old CRT watching 4:3 ratio images with a lap of baked beans on toast or cheese on toast, usually something on toast, whatever was there to hand? I think we all had the equivalent, didn't we? Can that be recreated or even bettered here in 2023 and beyond, using modern streaming platforms and augmented too by the modern miracle that is social media? Andy, you've set about your own challenge, haven't you, over the last couple of months? Explain to us what you're doing and precisely why. Why now?
Well, basically, why now? Well, it just so happened to fall in that way that I was going to start doing what I'm doing now. I wasn't really consciously thinking of the 60th when I started it. I just thought it's about time I did this again. So without any further ado, what I'm doing at the moment is watching every single episode of Doctor Who from An Unearthly Child right up to where we're at the moment, which is The Power of the Doctor. And if I consult my little book here, I think this is the one. This is my 5th Doctor Who marathon all the way through visually. So I started on the 11th of January this year. So, literally I'm only a month into this. And for me at the moment, just started the Aztecs this morning. William Hartnell is the Doctor. This is the beauty of it, I think. Nobody else is the Doctor. You can't conceive of anybody else being the Doctor than the one you're watching and going with. This is my 5th marathon, and I started it a month ago, and very excited. Pick up something new every time. Some stories I'm more familiar with than others, obviously, but yeah, it's I really enjoy doing it this way. And I leave. Takes about 2.5 years. If anybody's got the gumption to try and do this, if you can somehow manage to watch 2 episodes a night, 4 times a week. Takes about 2.5 years. Obviously,
Andy,
it takes longer.
you're answering all my questions in one sentence. Slow down. Yeah. Slow down. So, okay. So you've mentioned you've done this before several times, and you've even made notes about all the times that you've done it. And do you make notes of how many episodes you watch in a given day? And
I've got my trusty old book I've had here for 40 odd years, which I'm sure you both recognise. And I just write in the cover there. I just scribble down marathons. So my first one, if that's a good point to start, was with a scrappy pile of videotapes. I didn't have them all. My son at that time was 4 years old, so 1999. And I said to myself, we had no dream of Doctor Who coming back. Would you like to, trying to make him a Doctor Who fan, basically. 4 was the age I started.
Don't use the word indoctrination.
Sorry? 4's a good age to start, isn't it, for Doctor Who?
Yeah, that's when I started, around about there.
And funnily enough, it took us to go through all these old videotapes. We weren't watching it in any kind of ambition of certain numbers. I didn't have them all then. It was, do you remember, again, those old fan copies you used to get of people stuff through the post, and you could hardly see the pictures. But I had videotape, so it took us 6 years, and we finished. I'm not joking. We finished my first ever Doctor Who marathon a week before Rose was broadcast.
Wow!
I heard it up at the end.
This is uncanny. This is absolutely uncanny, Andy. This mirrors almost exactly my experience too. So much so, it's kind of blown my mind. I was a father, a new father around that time too, and of course I set about bringing my child into the world of Doctor Who. Who wouldn't? Now, the book that you're talking about, this is the Doctor Who program guide. The first, there was 2 volumes, wasn't there? But specifically, the first one dealt with the programs, didn't it? When was this published, Simon?
81. Just after Logopolis, the end of Logopolis, or around about the time of the end of Logopolis. And I can still remember walking into W.H. Smith's and just seeing these 2 unannounced on the W.H. Smith's bookshelf. I had no idea these were coming out. And it was just like fireworks going off in my brain. It was a book that had everything in right up to the end of Logopolis. It was just literally mind-blowing to find this, and in the kind of detail that we'd never ever seen before, because at that point, of course, the weekly not long turned monthly, and so it was still fairly new, and so they were very, very, very far down the list of sort of chronicling all of the television stories up until that point. So the fact still remained, when I was reading this program guide, as we all were, there was stuff in there that none of us knew anything about, stories that we'd never even heard of. So this was big league stuff to get these 2 program guides in 81 when they came.
It took me years to track down the second one, but I remember when it was a similar experience. I went into W.H. Smith's, I saw the first volume of the program guide, and what attracted me, Andy, was on the back cover there's a sentence that says all the Doctor Who stories in one book. I thought, brilliant! I haven't got to worry about trying to work out which book comes after what, and tracking down all those paperbacks. They're already up to over 100 on the spine, the numbering on the spine. Then I've just got it all in this one book. I thought that would satisfy me, Simon. That would be the only Doctor Who book that I would ever need from that point on. How wrong was I? It only made me worse. It opened it all up. So this book's been indispensable to you, Andy, and this is what you go back to. You make notes inside, you say?
It's pretty much about the only book that I've got from those days. As we all had our wobbles over the years, I sold all my Target novels.
Me too. Yeah, I did the same, Andy. I share your pain.
Yeah, but I kept this, and I've just found in here, inside the index, I've actually written down all the Peter Davison stories. This is my writing from the early 80s. And the Sylvester McCoys with a bit of Tipex, where they probably changed the running order, actually, added to this book.
You even had the nerve.
It's probably the only thing I've got back from those days. And I still keep it going with my marathons inside the front cover. So they'll bury this with me, no doubt.
So obviously that book only goes up to Logopolis, doesn't it? There's been considerably more Doctor Who since then, but that is still your tome of choice.
Not really. I just kept it going, and I've always got it on my shelf with my DVDs, and I've got. I don't have masses of Doctor Who books, but I bought the Complete History series. That's the only other real thing I've got, and 1 or 2 others. But it's just always hanging around, and I flick through it, and if I've got my DVDs are in the wrong order, I don't bother looking up on the internet. I go through this and say, oh, hang on, the Romans, then it's whatever, and I shuffle them around according to this. So it's always to hand.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I'm with you on this. I don't have my original copy of it, sadly. Again, I just sold everything or gave it all away to the charity shop. I can't remember, but it all went. And so I've rebought them again now. But I agree with you, actually. The number of times I still go back to that original program guide just to check. Oh, sorry, what order were the stories in season 4? So I'll just go and have a look. That's always my first tome of choice for those years up until Legopolis. Still now.
Amazing.
So when you set about this, you've got a pace? You set yourself, how many episodes was it per day?
I tried to do. Funnily enough, this goes back to my friend Ian Levine, who you may touch on later, who I've known for a couple of decades, and he was the one that kind of said, when he first instilled it in me, the only way to watch Doctor Who is from start to finish. You get the whole breadth of everything, and he was the one who said. I said, well, how do you do it? And he said, well, I watch 2 episodes every night. But I think he went 7 nights a week. Before bed, 2 episodes a night. Last thing he does.
Hardcore. Before bed?
Before bed, I think that's what he did. This was a few years ago now. I don't know if he still does it the same way. But I tend to go Sunday to Wednesday, 2 episodes a night, or once we get to the new series, 1 episode a night. And 2.5 years or so, it's done. Then I go and watch something else for a year, come back and start it all over again.
I mean, what of course would be lovely if time would allow, and of course it won't, if that would allow, to do 1 episode. Because I'm the same as you, Andy. If I'm watching Doctor Who these days, I will always watch 2 episodes together, back to back, which is great to do because we have the opportunity to do that, and it's very indulgent to do it. But it is a shame because, of course, we are destroying how the way we used to watch it in the day, and that week seemed a very, very
long. It was crazy. It was awful sometimes to wait a week for the next episode, and then a 6-parter would be forever. It felt like half your life. And
so there is a temptation to just watch those in single episodes at a time, but it's just too tempting now. We've got the stuff on tap, and so of course you're going to watch 2 episodes.
I still feel that's quite good though. 2 episodes isn't bad. I know quite a few people go for the movie length thing and watch a whole story all at once. We're still maintaining that episodic feel by doing it in 2 chunks, aren't we? So we're halfway there.
Well, the intention, they were never intended to be watched. Then they're not movies, are they? There's a certain artistry to at their best. I'm not going to say all 150 odd classic stories do this well, but there is an artistry to creating 25 minutes of television, of serial adventure television for that specific demographic too, that blend of generations that Doctor Who, I still think mostly uniquely serves. And so whilst I think we can spoil ourselves, can't we, with going at it sort of episode after episode after episode. It very much depends on the individual, I suppose. But I'm exactly the same as you two guys. If I watch more than 2, I believe I'm spoiling myself, and I'm kind of spoiling the story and kind of low-level disrespecting the original intentions. I don't know. You should sit with it for a little while.
Yeah, I think like a good wine, it has to be savoured. It is as simple as that, and you don't want to consume it all in one go. And you're right, Dan. Those episodes were very, very carefully constructed to work as 25 minutes, which of course is why John Nathan Turner and Eric Sayward had such a hard time then converting it to single 50-minute episodes for season 22, because they realized actually, they just work as half an hour in that original classic format. They just work. It always used to amaze me, as a kid. I could never understand, and it still surprises me now, where 25 minutes came from. I don't know any other program on television in history, certainly on BBC, that is 25 minutes long. Yeah, okay, they were always 25 minutes on ITV because they would have a 5-minute break in the middle of it. But BBC, why were they so insistent that they were 25 minutes? Why not half an hour? Where did this 25 minutes come from? It's always intriguing me.
Do you think it was to do with news reports and sports bulletins and things tending to be like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, little chunks here, weather, sport, news? You've got all those things floating around, Andy. Is that what do you think? What do you think?
Kind of. I'm just trying to think where it used to slot in. Was it right after Grandstand? Because that would always finish at about 5:10.
Yeah.
Then you'd have the news, and it would be like 5:20, wouldn't it? It'd always be on at like 5:20, finishing at 5:40. That rings a bell to me. I don't know.
Well, the original intention, of course, was, to slot it between, as I recall, Grandstand and Jukebox Jury. Mm-hmm. So I can only assume when they were formulating it, that's where it was supposed to go. So I'm assuming that it was a 25-minute slot that they'd got to film.
But yes,
so that's
incredible that lasted for 20
Yeah, exactly.
years.
Yeah. Why are they still? And again, I can remember when once they scrapped the after season 22, they scrapped these 50-minute episodes, and they insisted it go back. The programmers insisted it go back to 25-minute slots. Again, you kind of think, why didn't they then say, what is this archaic 25-minute slot? Let's do a half an hour. Let's round it up. You've got to wonder. Don't know. One of the quirks of Doctor Who.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we are in 2023 and viewing habits do change, and none of us are immune to the shortening of our attention spans. So I was wondering, Andy, would you confess to ever doing this? Because obviously on Netflix and Amazon, where they set the series after series, you can binge watch modern day shows or anything they've got the rights to. They give you the option, don't they, on those to skip or fast forward through title sequences and recaps to get to the juicy stuff. Now, if you're watching 2 or 3 episodes of something all in one, and you've got maybe a bedtime, you've got that sort of that hard stop bedtime that you've got to adhere to. Do you ever do that? Do you ever fast forward through the opening titles of classic Doctor Who?
We're getting deeply personal now, aren't we? No, I don't fast forward through the opening titles, but I must admit I only watch the closing titles of the last episode.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But the other main thing I do, fast forwarding massively to New Who, I never ever watch the new episode previews. I don't think I've seen one to this day. Even when they were first broadcast, the pause button goes straight on as soon as it says next time. I honestly don't think, my son's the same, I don't think I've ever seen a next episode preview for anything from 2005 to this day.
I agree with you on that one. Somebody was saying recently that supposedly it was 2005 Doctor Who that introduced this whole idea of the next time trailer. And if it was, I cursed Russell T Davies to the ends of the world, because it's just one of the worst things on television ever. And even now, we're not talking about Doctor Who now. I'm talking about anything. Broadchurch, Happy Valley, whatever it might be. I'm the same as you, Andy. I always just immediately turn off the TV or hit the pause button. I don't want to see what happens next time. I'll wait till next time for that. So if Russell T Davies, if you came up with the idea, I'll never forgive you for it, because everybody does it now.
There is one thing even worse than that, but it's not Doctor Who, but a very slight aside. And if Doctor Who ever did it, I think I might switch off forever. It's where you get a program, a documentary or a drama series, and they do that awful 30 seconds or a minute up front, which shows you pretty much everything that's going to happen over the next hour. That is the worst.
I can't stand that. But then again,
Who's never done
Andy, Andy, programs have been doing that since the 70s. When
I know Thunderbirds. Whenever I hear that past music coming on in Thunderbirds, my hands go.
I do the same. I'm watching Columbo all the way through for the very first time with Peter Falk, and they have a big chunk at the front where they tell you a certain amount of the story in, and I do exactly the same. I sort of shut my eyes, put the thing on mute, go and do something else for a little while, whatever else. And I can't abide it.
So thank goodness Doctor Who has never done that.
Yet. Russell T Davies didn't invent the next time thing. I saw it originally on the program Spooks, the spy series on the BBC. That was the very first place that I saw it. And you know what? Playing devil's advocate, I see entirely what you guys mean. But I think with populist television, there's a certain, I don't know, there's something about leaving, the way that a cliffhanger did in the classic show, leaving people on a bit of a high and oh my God, I can't wait till the next one. I think by having next time trailers, you retain that charm. I can't wait to see what was that in the next time trailer. How are they going to get out of that? Oh my God, that character's back. I think it's the same sort of thing. When they had to lose the cliffhanger, that's the nearest they could get to sort of having the same appeal and keeping it in the viewer's mind for 7 days. Does that convince you in any way, Simon?
No, not remotely. If I get what you're saying, and I think if they were done differently, if it was done in a really fast cut, very fast edited montage without any audio, just bang, 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 that might actually pique my curiosity, whereas actually giving you lines and showing parts of scenes, It's just ridiculous. And particularly in the case of Doctor Who, it literally becomes ridiculous because, of course, you've gone through all this effort to set up this cliffhanger that puts the Doctor or the companion in jeopardy. And then the next time trailer just immediately says, but don't worry, it's fine. They're absolutely fine next week. Whereas, going back to what we were just talking about, that a week was a long time. When I was a kid, you genuinely felt afraid, I did, for the Doctor and the companion. I don't think we had that sort of blasé attitude that everything was going to be okay, that the Doctor would be all right next week. Because, I don't know, yeah, exactly, Peter. Sometimes you just weren't convinced or certainly you didn't know how the Doctor was going to get out of it. And that was part of the charm. Whereas just seeing the trailer that just says, don't worry, he does get out of it, it just completely undermines the whole point of the cliffhanger. It's as simple as that. You just might as well not bother.
Have you ever done one of these marathons or set yourself this task of watching it all the way through, Simon? Exactly the way that Andy's described it.
No, I'd absolutely love to do it, and I really envy you, Andy, with doing it. No, the closest I have got to this is what I'm now doing, which is with the new Blu-ray box sets. What I will do is, for the first time ever now, when a Blu-ray box set comes out, I will watch that. Obviously, I'm watching the actual season completely out of order within the scope of 60 years of Who. But within the season itself, I will start at the beginning. I'll start at the Leisure Hive, for example, and I'll watch it right the way through in order up to Legopolis. And so I'm watching a season properly as it was meant to be seen in that year. And that's the first time, aside from obviously watching it live on transmission, that's the first time ever I've done that. And part of the charm of doing that is, again, what I'm actually doing for the first time ever is I'm watching, as I say, those seasons, at least within the season, I'm watching the stories in order. And then, as I'm going through each story, I'm taking the time to do the kind of reading and research that I love doing, that I wouldn't normally bother to do. So I'm going, you mentioned, Andy, the complete collection, the complete history, sorry, the Panini book. I'll watch the Leisure Hive, for example, and then I'll go and pull out everything I can find on the Leisure Hive. So yeah, the complete history, the issue of Invision, the old issues of the magazine, About Time, the great book by Lance Parkin and Lawrence Miles, the location book, and I'll read about everything I can find to do with the Leisure Hive, and then I'll move on to the next one. And so that's something that I'm doing for the first time ever. And that's
so you immerse yourself in the time period, not just what's on screen, but everything that was going on around it as well. Almost like a time capsule that you're opening up again.
Exactly. And I'm really enjoying doing that because, of course, in the past, when I've read up about these stories, I've always read up about them when I haven't recently watched the story. But by doing this now with the Blu-rays, this is all fresh in my mind. So at the moment, for example, I'm just on Sharda from season 17. So I'm reading all the stuff about Sharda that I never read before, having literally just watched the story. So everything that I'm reading makes sense. And I can, now I get how that was working. And it's a brilliant way of doing it. So I'm thoroughly enjoying doing that. But that's obviously going to take me a lot longer than it is you, Andy, because you're in a bit of a marathon. You're blasting them through, aren't you?
Well, last time I did it, which was, 2019 to 2021, I've written here all episodes plus the books. So I did actually read the complete history for the first time in conjunction. So what I was doing is I was watching Doctor Who in the evening, and then at lunchtime or whatever, I would read the complete history. So yeah, I've managed to squeeze that in. So
do the same kind of thing as me, basically, then, in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very impressive. So when is your target to finish this?
I don't really have one. I just know from previous. We're looking at just under 3 years. So it's always exciting to me. The most exciting thing about starting it is because when you finish it, whatever's current for Doctor Who is nothing like what will be current by the time you finish it. So I'm looking at finishing probably the end of 2025. Who knows where we'll be then? Will we still have the same Doctor? Will Russell still be around? Will Doctor Who still be on TV? I don't know. It's will I still be around as we get older?
So how do you get on? For example, how much do you have to work your life around this marathon? In that, are you absolutely? That is it. I'm watching the 2 episodes. And so I don't care that I'm supposed to be doing that tonight. No, I'm watching Doctor Who, and so nothing's stopping me. Or do you feel awful if you have to drop one night when you can't?
Well, I got going, as I say, a month ago, and me and my wife booked a holiday, which we just got back from, and that really annoyed me because I lost a week so early into starting a new marathon. Very enthusiastic. Here we go, William Hartnell. I got through the Keys of Marinus, and then I've gone off 2,000 miles away for a week. That did quite annoy me. I had a lovely time, but it was a long wait until the Aztecs, which I started this morning. So
the Aztecs is great.
So I tried to keep to that schedule, but yeah, I know I'm gonna slide here and there. So the 8 weeks is a goal. The 8 episodes a week is a goal, but I'm not always going to do it.
I see. And so what would happen if, for example, let's say with the Daleks, which is a 7-part story, does that mean that you would watch episode 7 of the Daleks and then episode 1 of The Edge of Destruction, or do you wait until the following night and you watch?
It's funny. I can't remember what I've done before, but what I did this time, I must admit, I sneakily snuck in an extra episode. And I watched 5, 6, and 7 all together.
Because let's be honest,
I couldn't split stories in one night. No.
You've got to watch The Edge of Destruction as kind of a thing. I think it works so well.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you've got to, where you get the odd one. There's not too many of those, but yeah, you've got to compromise a bit there.
Do you find that you come up against stories that I don't know, when you last did your marathon watch, or when you first watched it, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, you loved a story and now you just kind of think, no, you know what, I'm rewatching, I don't like that, or vice versa? Do you learn to love stories that you didn't like at the time?
It's both, really. Do you know what the amazing thing with this is? It changes every time, because every time you think, oh, I can be sick to death of this story. I can't remember now, but it's happened a couple of times. And even some of my favourites, I thought, oh, I've just watched that, but I've not really taken it in. And then you think the next time you go around, you'll think, oh, I remember last time that I felt I'd overlooked that, so I'm really going to focus on it this time. But I love it all. So you always find something new to pick up. And yeah, some stories you're always less familiar with than others because you haven't seen them as many as others, like ones you may not have had on videotape back in the day. Mm-hmm. Still, to me, the reconstructions are absolute revelations. They're definitely the stories I've seen the least. I will watch them, sadly, on a in whatever format I watch on a big screen. I sit there watching these reconstructed photographs on a 100-inch projector screen, quite sadly.
Yeah.
But, those are the ones I tend to be the least familiar with.
That was going to be my next question, really. How are you meeting the challenge of the missing episodes? Because we're very fortunate in the times that we live in that there's options, aren't there? Some have been animated. There are telesnaps available that are put together by Loose Cannon and other people. There's the official audio releases too for the people who are happy just to take in the audio and maybe put the visuals themselves. Depending on the kind of person you are and how you receive this and how you like to take in story, there are more options now than there ever have been since these things were screened. We'd all love to have every episode back in the archives or reconstructed to the best possible standards, but we are where we are. And so how do you choose which version to watch? Or have you got, again, a hard and fast rule, I am doing the recons or I am listening to the audio? How do you come to that?
Again, everybody's got their totally personal preference to this, haven't they? Mine is, and I doubt Ian Levine will watch this, but if he does, he'll hate me for this because I know he's such a passionate animation fan, but I cannot do the animations. I don't get it. I can't do it. I know so many love them, and that's great, but I like to try and find something that's at least got the face of the actors and the sets, or as close to the sets. So for me, it has to be the reconstructions all the way, because my imagination then can fill in the gaps, if you like. I've seen probably the reconstruction of Marco Polo 3 or 4 times now, and I actually feel sometimes I've seen that, haven't I? It's so good. You feel like you've seen the episode because it was so well telesnapped, that one, that by watching that reconstruction, you can fill in the gaps to a certain degree and feel like you've watched that episode. For me, that's what it's all about. I can't lose myself in the animations to feel like I've seen the episode. With reconstructions, I can. So it's an entirely personal choice.
Yeah.
In my experience, it is completely down to the individual. Yeah. I had exactly the same experience with the exact same story. The recon that I saw of Marco Polo brought it to life for me in a way that I did. Sort of my mind fooled me into believing that I'd seen the story. It was the strangest thing. I suppose we've got more photos for some stories than others, haven't we, Simon? So, and I suppose it depends on how the story was written as well. That if it's particularly energetic and if it's quite diverting, Marco Polo moves quite a lot, doesn't it? The story moves quite a lot in that.
Yeah, but I'm Andy. I 100% spot on with you with this one. I struggle with the animations. I respect why they're doing them. I appreciate the artistry and some of them, and I revile the lack of artistry in some of them. But for me, it will always be those telesnap reconstructions, because for me, the animations just take me out of the episode. They're just too distracting for me, in that I'm watching a gimmick at the end of the day. It's not like watching a true reconstruction of what that episode would have looked like. It's somebody else's interpretation of it. It's got colour in there that it shouldn't have. As pretty as it is, often the animators will mess with backgrounds, they'll change things. So it's not like watching the original episode.
It's a new production, Simon, in many respects.
And that's right. And I don't want that. I'm with Andy on this one. I want the episode, I want what I'm watching to look as close as I can possibly get it to how it would have looked on broadcast. And that's photos. And as dull in a way as that is, and as difficult as some people would find that, and as inaccessible as some people would find that, as opposed to animation, I'm spot on with you, Andy. For me, it's tele-snap reconstructions every time.
I have also done a marathon, Andy, and strangely enough, I did it. I commenced mine in 1999. I've only ever done it once. In fact, I started it with the pilot episode on New Year's Eve 1999, and I began the series proper on New Year's Day 2000. Wow. The idea being, so this was before they announced that Doctor Who was coming back. Yeah. I didn't particularly have set myself a pace. I hadn't long become a father myself, funnily enough, and I would go on to have a couple more kids. So it was around that time where I was starting a family, and I was working strange shifts too. So I would watch it 25 minutes actually in between some of the shift patterns that I was on. Worked really, really well. It meant that I could get some escapism in, whereas I couldn't have even managed to have squeezed in an episode of, say, Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Babylon 5, whenever it was big at the time. So I did it all, and I finished. When did I finish? I finished about 3 weeks before the premiere of Series 1 and the first episode of Rose. So it's very similar to yours. Wow. It did take me over 5 years, but like I say, I was raising kids. I was doing X, Y, and Z. And that's the only time I've ever done it, though. I've never gone back and tried it again. But I'm getting itchy to do it, if you know what I mean. Yeah, just lately I feel like I should really do that again, because now we are in a place where I've got all the recons. I've got, because that time I did have to skip certain stories. So I haven't, you could say, well, you didn't do a proper marathon then, but I did as best as I could. If I got a lot of the audios, I'd got what I'd got. And it still took me 5 years. So I have done it. There is a certain parallel there to what you've done.
I have to be honest, you guys are inspiring me, because I've never done it, but now the more I'm talking,
you've got to do it.
I am thinking now, what I will do here is, because the way that I'm doing it now with the Blu-rays, obviously it takes a very long time, because I'll watch a story and then it'll take me a couple of weeks just to read everything I can find about it. So what I am intrigued about trying now, once I've got all the Blu-ray box sets out there and I've done all my reading and research that I want to do, I'll start again, because those box sets will be out quicker than we know. We're already halfway through, incredibly, we're halfway through those Blu-ray box sets. So it won't be long before I've got all of them. So that's when I will start. I'm going to take up the challenge. I'll start and do the lot. I'll do it this time.
With me and these rewatches, I do consider it to be a very personal thing. I mean, do you count Sharda, for an example, because it wasn't broadcast?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question. Do you count Sharda, Andy?
I do, because it was supposed to be broadcast, wasn't it? Yeah. I think that's the thing. And I'm trying to think back. Probably the first marathon I did, we had that scratchy videotape.
Yeah.
I think I had an American videotape version of it, so somehow I must have had some kind of fancy video player with the Tom Baker links, and it never really made much sense. And then the next version I saw was Ian Levine's Sharda, which he did himself with a group of fans, and did a very credible animation version of it. And then a couple of years later, of course, we got the BBC did the same thing, and we have the proper Sharda we've got now, which is absolutely, both of those versions, Ian's and the BBC, I hold equally, even though Ian's one doesn't have Tom Baker in it. They are equally good in their own ways, and I always include Sharda. I think it's a fantastic story. It's one of my favourites.
See, I would as well. I would never dream of skipping Sharda, and yet I thought to myself, because I asked myself these questions before I knew I was coming to speak to you, I thought, well, why? It wasn't broadcast. It is a kind of footnote, but it stars Tom Baker, as you say, was intended for broadcast. Some incredibly motivated, talented, dedicated people have created several versions of this story to suit anyone. So, yeah, pick one. Do it.
Interestingly, the very, very first version of Sharda I saw was, I think it was Ian Levine's original version that he did in 1983.
Oh, wow.
That I saw at Grand Hotel in Birmingham at the Panopticon. I can't think what it was called. It wasn't called Panopticon. It was the Dwas Convention, but it was the 20th anniversary version of Panopticon. And I can still remember on the Saturday night, they made this big announcement, we have got Sharda. And of course, everybody was just going ballistic because they know it. And so I'm sure it's Ian Levine that had done this version. So what he'd done is he'd taken just the original, obviously the footage from the studio and the location, and compiled it together in order with just very brief computer-generated cards between saying briefly what the missing footage was. But of course, there was no music. They were working with the studio sound, so you could hear occasionally. You'd hear the directions of the floor manager, etc. on there. No sound effects, nothing like that. So I have to be honest, it was quite a tough watch. It was your patience was pushed to its limits, but it was a very exciting thing to do. And so I've always had a love of Sharda ever since then because of that initial just excitement of, wow, we're going to get to see Sharda. Happy days.
The way that we consume this show, I think obviously the bulk of it that goes out on a Saturday evening to millions on the TV, it's that shared viewing experience like any other TV show. But the geekiness of it, where it goes afterwards, its extended life with each of us in the fandom. I think that you think, oh, I bet everybody does this. But the more you talk to other fans, the more you find out that people have their rituals, people have their sacred cows, the things that they would never do. I'd never fast forward through this, or I'd never do that, or I'd never watch more than this or less than that. We've got all those things. I mean, I found, for example, just the way that I store my DVDs, I've still got all the DVDs, but just the way that I store them just frustrates the hell out of some people when I've shown them pictures of my shelves, because I do store them in broadcast order. But Simon's peering at me.
What do you mean? How can you store them in anything other than that annoy people?
I store them in broadcast order, but what I do is I start on the bottom shelf from An Unearthly Child and then work my way up rather than from the top down. I start from the bottom up because, and my theory, and it drives people mad. People look at me and say, why aren't these in order? Well, they are in order. They're working up, not working down. And the reason why I did this was when I started doing this, and when I adapted. I'm not brilliant at DIY by any means, but I'm quite imaginative and quite versatile and resourceful. So I sort of adapted this thing that I got from IKEA and added bits and took bits away so I could do this. And the series is still ongoing at the time. I thought, well, if I want to stick that down, I want to leave it there, but I want to use the top shelves for something else, for something a bit more ornamental. And so I thought, well, this will work, and I can keep adding to it as long as I work my way up from the bottom. I know I'm completely nuts. Get in touch with me with ideas for therapy for CBT at Instagram and Twitter at Type40Doctor to help me with that one. But talking about bookshelves, Andy, here we are talking about Sharda and all the rest, all those things, all those slightly more contentious things. Even more so could be in this schedule of everything in Doctor Who and All in Order. Are you going really hardcore? Are you going to pull in spin-off shows, because they are in continuity, aren't they? Things do dip in out. So are you going to bring in the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood and Class and all that other stuff too?
Well, now I've done bits of that in the past, but I must admit, what I will do is I'll watch all of Doctor Who first, and then I'll decide, do I want to do any of the spin-off shows? I've added Torchwood on the end before, but of course that becomes more disjointed as time goes by. Torchwood gets further and further away, so if I get through, whatever happened over the next 2 or 3 years and then stick Torchwood on the end, it's from a different era, isn't it? So it doesn't quite fit. So I haven't planned at the moment to do anything other than Doctor Who this time, but
because there are no two-parters. There are no two-parters like you get in some American shows where part one of it is in Buffy and part two of it is in Angel, or from the $6 Million Man to the Bionic Woman. There's nothing like that causes a massive conflict. But as you say, as regards a snapshot of a time, then if you watch it afterwards, you are sort of going back on yourself a little bit.
You're giving me some dilemmas now.
I have to be honest. I think if I was doing what you're doing, Andy, I think it would be inconceivable not to watch Canine and Company in Castrovalva, because that is just so ingrained in my mind that it happened. I just couldn't not.
I must admit, last time again it got tagged on the end. I have to admit.
Yeah, no, it'd have to fit in between the two for me.
Because when we see Sarah in the Five Doctors, she's got K9.
Yeah, good point.
So,
Andy, I challenge you. You've got to throw K9 in.
Sorry, Andy.
I've got to take a year and a half to think it over till I get to that point.
Because some of these things do sort of weigh on my mind. I think things like Downtime, which is its characters that were used under license that carry on certain continuities for some of Sarah Jane's in there, so is Victoria. We meet Kate Stewart in there as well. She turns up later, albeit played by a different actress. I'd find it inconceivable not to watch that now as well around the time I watched the TV movie.
I have done that in the past. And I'm very lucky that Ian Levine's did a Downtime with Sylvester McCoy in it, which was quite good. Quite different, and I did watch that during one of my marathons. I must admit, after the Sylvester McCoy TV series, I watched Ian's Downtime with Sylvester in it. So, I'm no strict hard and fast there. I can change a bit on spin-offs and offshoots.
Well, if you say you're going with the Doctor Who, the complete history book, now that was a title put out as a part work, wasn't it? Partly connected to Doctor Who magazine, I believe. So some of the material was reprinted, but some of it was new or rewritten. Lovely little sort of slim hardback books, aren't they?
Mm.
Yeah, it was put out by Panini using the old archives that Andrew Pixley compiled of the classic stuff. And then you're right, Dan, it's basically reprints of those, but sometimes just in their entirety, but sometimes augmented with new material that they found since they published. And some of those early archives in the magazine were very, very thin on the ground on detail. But it's a great part work because it brings everything together to do with the production side of things.
Part of me wishes that I'd have bought them now. I remember when they were starting, I got all sorts of commitments to that. It was a very strange place. And I thought, do I commit to buying these? Because I knew that I wouldn't be able to get halfway in and stop. So I decided not to that time. And I do kind of regret it. But one thing that I always have to hand when I'm watching Doctor Who, unfortunately, again, it's only the classic era. But I think this is about the best book that I can think of, The Television Companion. That's by David J. Howe and Stephen James Walker, the official BBC guide to every TV story again there. That's the classic era up to the TV movie. And for me, I can't sort of soak myself in information the way that you've been doing, Simon. It sort of overloads me a little. I can watch the Blu-ray or DVD features, but I can't do too much reading. I find that there's just enough in here to fill my appetite before I move on to the next story. And then I might do some more reading afterwards. You can see there's a bookmark in there now for something that I'm watching. That's for a upcoming edition of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, everybody. And you see it's quite early in the run too, so you might be able to work out, if not the exact story, then the general lay of the land there. So I always have that to hand. And on the other end, we have Paul Cornell, Martin Day, and Keith Topping's book, The Discontinuity Guide, which I think that book's a lot of fun. and it's very silly and very frivolous, a bit like I am, and it sort of balances out what I get in there. But I'd love an updated one of either of these for the new series. Obviously, these end in 1996, so you're out of luck when it comes to the RTD upwards stuff. But that's what I find indispensable.
I guess we get the same frustration now with the complete history, because obviously that stopped at the end of Capaldi. And what I've done is a couple of the I don't buy every Doctor Who magazine.
So did Doctor Who.
I buy the odd issues of Doctor Who magazine that interest me, which is mainly about the new stuff. And Andrew Pixel is still doing these little snippet archives of each series. So I've got a couple of the magazines for the 2 Jodie Whittaker series, and they go in next to the complete history. So so it's just everything. Yeah, that's always going to be the frustration with any kind of part work, isn't it? Is that it carries on in some, it's never going to be complete if the show's ongoing.
So when you tell people, let's say you've got a family, you're married, you've got kids, when you explain to them what you're doing, do they just leave you to it, or do they shrug and say, "Oh, not again"? What's the kind of reaction?
Well, my son's a big Doctor Who fan now anyway, so I got him into it for. He's 28 now, so he's off doing his own marathon for the first time ever. I'm pleased at that.
Good man.
He lives 100 miles away. He's taken him a long time to do it, but he started. Where's he up to? I think he's up to near the end of Colin Baker, and he started doing on that. So it's taken him about 3 years, but he's doing it. So I'm really pleased to hand that legacy on. But my wife, she's just absolutely perplexed, and I say, right, okay, I'm off to watch my show. I've got this projector in another room, so I'll go and sit in the other room. I'll say, I'm watching my show now, and then we start the evening after I've watched my show. So she's used to it. I've been doing it for years. So.
But as you say, this time, as well as having your copy of the program guide as your constant companion, you are sharing this journey on social media, aren't you?
Yeah, I must admit, I was only going to. I've got a little Twitter account, and I was just going to put it on there. And Ian Levine had started off this new Facebook group, for people to have access to him. And he just said to me, "No, please post everyone on there." I said, "Well, are you sure people are going to want to know?" I said, "Well, okay, I'll do it." And yeah, the reaction's been really nice actually. You stick a story on there, and people say, "Oh, that's one of my favourites," or "I don't like it," or whatever. And it's just a nice thing to do, and for a new group as well, a new Facebook group, it kind of keeps it going, keeps the momentum going a bit as well. So I suppose
if you start to flag, you think, "God, the people are waiting. People want to know what I've got."
Well,
to think about
I hadn't really thought of it that way, because I've never. It's always been actually Doctor Who for me. I've never really been that involved with fandom or anything at all, and for a lot of people, I'm sure it's an intensely private thing. So for me to start sharing what I'm doing with Doctor Who out there is an alien concept to me, because it's always been quite private. So, well, yeah, it's so far so good.
Because, history would have it, Simon, it's not the sexiest hobby to have, is it? And the idea of squirreling yourself away, huddling down with a couple of episodes of something from decades past, when, playlists are filling up with these amazing new shows that get people talking and that are advertised on the sides of buzzes, and that Netflix is sort of encouraging us to watch with the startup menus and think, all that's there to grab our attention with, look at this new flashy thing. But yet here's Doctor Who in 4:3 with Dudley Simpson's music. It's so seductive, and yet it's old. A lot of people rule out the black and white stuff just on principle, don't they? It's such a shame.
They do. But I get it. I can understand why, certainly, young people of today that are brought up on Netflix and Amazon Prime series and that kind of stuff, I get why they might tune into, Marinus and think, what the heck is going on here, and kind of zone it out. I do get that, and I would forgive them for it. I would never knock anybody for saying, "Do you know what, it's just not my thing." But I think it's a real shame if they do pass it by. I mean, I can still remember when I first tuned in for An Unearthly Child in 1981 in the Five Faces season, and I remember how old was I at the time? About 13, something like that. I remember my parents saying, "Look, be prepared for this. It's going to be really creaky. It's going to be it's not like the Doctor Who you're used to now, having watched." Tom Baker. So I came to it very, very nervous of what it was going to be like. And of course, they were right. It is creaky. It's very old fashioned. It's nothing like the Doctor Who that I had been watching up until that point, through the sort of the John Pertwee and certainly the latter Tom Baker years. And yet I was absolutely entranced, and it didn't matter that it was old and creaky. I loved it and was as excited by it just as much as any of the colour stuff that I've been watching. And in comparison with, let's say, season 18 that it came straight on the back of, it looks, things like An Unearthly Child and the Crotons look very, very unsophisticated and poor. And yet I loved it. It never occurred to me that this was creaky and black and white.
I found watching that first story very strange, because I watched the Five Faces season 2, but with the Crotons, I think even though it was in black and white, it was still recognisably the same show then. TARDIS lands, companions, Doctor, exit, and the adventure kind of begins, and you know who are the black hats and who are the white hats. So I found that quite reassuring. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It's a difficult one. I mean, did you sort of find that, Andy, at all? As you consumed Doctor Who, did you go back at the black and white and think, wow, they really do look creaky?
Just all these memories come flooding back from the Five Faces of Doctor Who. I think the thing for me from that is, and I'm sure it was the same for you, these were just people on the Target book covers, and you could actually see the film. I'll never forget, oh my God, I'm watching the second Doctor. I can't get over that. Even, the emotions just come flooding back.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you.
There were good days. That's all I'll say. And it's a shame for anybody. But I get it that we were spoiled with that Five Faces season. It was mind-numbing, as you say, to think that we were going to watch Patrick Troughton. Whereas for kids these days, bless them, if everything does, as we're saying at the top of this show, if everything does suddenly become available for binge watching on iPlayer, it simply won't have the same, I don't think, the same misty-eyed attraction that it had for us when it was something that we never thought we would get.
We had to work so hard to get our bit of Doctor Who.
I agree. I think it's that anticipation, that looking at the release dates in Doctor Who magazine of what tape was coming out when, or TV Zone or whatever.
I don't know about you, but I used to actually handwrite letters into W.H. Allen saying, why have you deleted these books? I'm desperate for these books. Where can I get them? Why don't you reprint them? And, it took me years to hunt down a copy of, as it was, Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon. Years, and then suddenly it was a school friend. It felt like a lifetime, and I finally got it. But it was hard work, but very memorable.
They don't know they're born, do they? They don't know they're born. Now, maybe we can expand your mind and fill up your playlist. Here's some more now after a connecting call with Kev. As always, he's willing to tempt you with other engrossing, fun and portable podcasts covering all your favourite franchises and breaking geeky news, courtesy of the Fandom Podcast Network. You could end up finding your next essential listen here and now. Andy and Simon will be back in a couple of minutes too, so don't go anywhere.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our Fandom Flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalized you there, or should I say that Kev has, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. Just head over to tpublic.com, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and that's where you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of the shows on everything from T-shirts to phone cases, tapestries, and up. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself. Treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain, so everybody wins. Andy's still here. He's not snuck off to get an episode in. During the break there, we've retained his interest for a little while longer. And we're here talking about his big challenge to get through an entire marathon of not just classic Doctor Who or just new Doctor Who, but absolutely everything between now and whenever. Andy, I don't mind telling you that there are certain points when I've done this in the past, or even when I've just done season by season, like you were saying, Simon, through a new box set. There are bogey eras that I've got that I go at them really, really fast and hard. I go at them with the best of intentions, but I flag and I drop the ball a little. In my case, it's the Pertwee era. Too many six-parters with a bit too much fat on for me. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, Ian, if you're watching. Even David Diaz, to him, that is heresy. But this is the thing, isn't it? It depends on who you are. So I've got that as my bogey era. Have you got any times in the show where you have to sort of power yourself through them?
As time goes on and history heals, I find, probably as with a lot of fans, I really struggled with Sylvester McCoy's first season when it was first broadcast, even though that was the first one I taped off the TV and I probably watched it more than any other. I still struggle with Sylvester McCoy's stuff quite a bit, but I enjoy it because it's such a short run and my appreciation grows every time I watch it. But yeah, that's probably I grew up with John Pertwee and Tom Baker, and I love Peter Davison. Colin Baker, I must admit, that's the only time from 1971 I did not watch the Trial of the Time Lord on broadcast. I'd left Doctor Who for a year at that point. I came back for Sylvester McCoy, so I didn't actually see Trial of the Time Lord until the little TARDIS video cassette box came out, and that was quite exciting for me because I got that for a Christmas present. It was like brand new Doctor Who. Doctor Who was off the air, and I've got new Doctor Who. So, in some ways, although I regret missing it on broadcast, it was exciting for me in those lean years to have some new Doctor Who to watch.
I did the same thing actually with Sylvester McCoy. I drifted. I'm very similar to you. I started watching in '71. I struggled through the McCoy years just because of the stories. Nothing to do with Sylvester. Just didn't like the stories. And I must be honest, I stopped watching. The Happiness Patrol pretty much finished me off for a while, I'm afraid. But I kind of so I sympathise with you. But there must within the whole run, there must be points when a certain story's coming up in your watch that you really struggle with. Are there stories, maybe not necessarily eras, but are there stories that you kind of think, I'm really going to struggle through that one again?
Well, it's funny because I've thought that previously, and then I sit down probably with a bit more concentration or understanding. One of the traditional ones which fans struggle with is probably Underworld, so that would be one.
Yeah.
But you watch it again, you think, okay, relax, and I enjoy it more. I think when I worry about them, Warrior's Gate was another one because it's kind of a bit all over the place, but relax, sit back, let it flow over you. And so I don't really have one that I dread. Again, I can understand the Pertwee comment that Dan made, Ambassadors of Death, heresy to some I know, but boy, that can seem to drag with its repeated plot, kind of shut in the room, shut in the room, have a room. But yeah, it can be a mental challenge, but I find it quite easy to get over that. And in some ways, I appreciate the stories that I'm not looking forward to more than the ones that I really love and I am looking forward to. It's such a strange thing, but that often happens.
That's started to happen to me recently. I mean, for what I've just said about the Pertwee era, a couple of years ago, I set myself a challenge of watching a few stories from different eras that I wasn't so keen on or familiar with. Underworld was one. I'd only ever seen that story, I think, once before. No, twice, sorry. And it had sort of left no impression on me at all. So that was one of them. But another one was The Mutants, a 6-part Pertwee story. And I thought, God, this is...
with that.
But I really, really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it on lots of different levels. I wouldn't say I couldn't wait for it to end, but I felt so satisfied by it. I got it, I think. I got the story. I understood why it was being told. And because I think when we like something, a Doctor Who story, we overlook certain production values and performances, if something is compelling us to see what happens next. And I'd never got that with The Mutants until that watch. And that's really got me thinking now, the next time I come back to it, just as you said, Andy, what will I find in either another Pertwee story or in one of the other stories, maybe from the Troughton era, or even a couple of the Tom Baker stories that I'm less fond of? What will it unlock that I hadn't seen before?
I'm just thinking now, there's one that I'm absolutely dreading, and it's a long way off, but I've seen it twice now, and I'm sure many fans will agree, but it's going to be right near the end of my run. But it might not be near the end because we're talking of a couple of years' time. Legend of the Sea Devils.
Oh,
absolutely sure. I've had to watch that 3 times in the last 12 months for this show.
Oh, for you.
I have to be honest, Andy. I do take my hat off to you because the Chris Chibnall era, I could never ever watch an episode a second time. I watched them all once. Well, actually, I haven't. I dipped out, but
I very much doubt that I will revisit this era ever again under any circumstances. But when eternity is a long time, isn't it? Or at least however many years I'm granted left. You never know, I suppose. But at the moment, it's so far in the rearview mirror. I'm happy to leave it.
Time does heal.
Likewise, then, Andy, are there stories that you just really are looking forward to rewatch? I know there would be with me.
I must admit, I'm not really. I'm quite present focused in that I don't, because as I said at the very start of this podcast, I think for me at the moment, it's all about William Hartnell.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anybody else being the Doctor. This is the great thing about doing it in this way. He is the Doctor. He's going to be the Doctor for a while. I dread to think of him ending. I don't look forward to the stories. I just focus on. I don't even really think about what's coming. I don't even try and think about more than 1 or 2 ahead. So. I keep that out of my brain. You cannot. That's what the amazing thing is that you just cannot imagine somebody else being the Doctor when you get that immersed in the marathon, and then it changes and it's new and it's exciting and.
Right. So in which case, here's a question for you. I'm not sure whether you have been indulging in the Blu-ray box sets, but if you have, what happens when a new box set comes out? You're obviously going to restrict yourself and not watch that new Blu-ray box set, I'm guessing.
You're right. I must admit, I've got to be a little bit naughty there. I'm planning to get them all kind of when they're all out. I haven't got any of them yet. Again, this is this highly personal thing again, isn't it? I'm finding it, as the years go by, I'm finding it harder to watch the extras and the interviews with people that are gone.
Okay.
So that there's that sort of disconnect there, and it becomes a bit sad. But where I do struggle in my marathons is when New Who comes on, because of course you want to watch the new stuff, but you might be bogged down in the middle of the key to time or something. But of course you want to watch the new stuff, so I have to break then and watch new episodes as and when they're broadcast. Of course.
Which is understandable. Is there any? Do you think there will come any point at all in the middle of this where you'll kind of think, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this again?" Nah. Or that I'm going to watch the Robots of Death because I just happen to love the Robots of Death, or whatever it is. Or do you think you'll stay
Yeah,
dead?
because that's not one of my favourites. Has always been, as with many people, the Pyramids of Mars, and that's one of the ones. Last time I felt I've glossed over this a bit, and that was the one. As a child, it really affected me, and loved it. And I whizzed through it last time. I thought I've not really taken it in, and the wow factor wasn't there. So this time around, I've already made a mental note. When I get to the Pyramids of Mars, I'm going to try and pretend I'm this 11-year-old kid again, and not be this jaded old curmudgeon that I am now, and take it in. So
is there any point at all where you kind of think you wish you could watch these fresh again? Because this is certainly something that I get, that the more I watch those old stories, it's not to say that some of the love goes for them, but you just become so familiar with them that you just stop appreciating them because you're jaded. And there is so much of me that I'd love to just watch those with completely fresh
when
eyes.
you know them line by line as well, Simon, when you can practically recite it as the actors are saying it. It's a strange feeling.
And my enjoyment of them definitely dips from the point of view of I'm just so familiar with some of them now. Do you get that as well, Andy?
I do a little bit, but I do the same thing with music, where you've obviously got songs where you'd know every lyric and almost every drum beat or guitar riff or whatever. Yeah. And with music, I focus in on something I might not have listened to before, whether it's a bass line. So I think with Doctor Who, it might be the same thing, where I'll look for something, whether it's the scenery or the way it's shot or the locations, just to think of something to take me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
To try and keep that appreciation fresh. You're right, it's a hard thing to do. And that may be why I've struggled last time with Pyramids of Mars, because it is one of those where I read the Target novel till it fell apart in my hands, watched it on broadcast, I had the videotape. But it's trying to mentally refresh yourself before you watch it, because otherwise it just becomes watching it by rote, doesn't it? Which is no fun. It's not.
Yeah.
I think for me, there is still as well a novelty in the fact that I'm able to do this, that it's all there. Absolutely. in one form or another, several forms, come to think of it. We heard about Russell T Davies. They're pushing for it to come to iPlayer, and I get that. But there are these Blu-rays coming out. The best part work series in history, I think, certainly in the geek spheres. We've got those coming out. We've had the DVDs, we've had the videos, we've got the Target books, and everything else that's come along, script books and all manner of things, audio books and the soundtracks. It's all there. Somehow it's all within reach in a way that it hasn't ever been before. And for me, I've said this before, for me at the moment, the classic series seems more alive, certainly, than I can ever remember. There's more people talking about it. More of it's becoming more commercially available. They're finding new ways to, I don't want to use the word exploit it, explore it, and to reoffer it, and to, I suppose, to kind of resell it and endure these very oldest of stories. And to me, Andy, that means that even though this is that little 25-minute show that used to be after the football results in the 60s and the 70s, and little creaky 4:3 TV on a budget of next to nothing, that means that it's not just us, that this is worth more than the average TV show. This is of great value, and it's more than worthwhile scheduling these return trips over and over and over again throughout our lives, just to get something. If we get something new back from it, brilliant. But going back to a happy place too, there's a lot to be said for that. And I don't think there's anything infantile about that at all. I think it's reassuring. It helps. It can help get us through some really challenging times in life, can't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And certainly, in the early days of some of my marathons, and when I was commuting long distances to work, it's a perfect switch off. After a long, stressful day, come in and put Doctor Who on, you're instantly a kid again. And I think your other point was good. It's I never take it for granted, and I think that's got to be an age thing. Definitely, is we remember how I sit there and watch the Daleks, and I think, oh my God, I'm actually watching William Hartnell with the Daleks, the second story ever. I can't believe this. It still doesn't seem real all these years later. So I'll never take it for granted, and I always appreciate it.
I think the other thing that I've noticed, really following on from what you were saying, Dan, is I do think that there is, in recent years, an unexpectedly robust respect for the classic years that never really existed before, from the point of view of, when we were all growing up, and even when we were young adults, because we're all of a similar age. You were still seen as the geek, and it was still seen as that quaint little show that if you liked it, you were a little bit strange. Whereas I do feel now, within fandom, there is a renewed respect for the old, for the heritage of the old show. It's certainly not something that is being brushed under the carpet as kind of the footnote of what is now clearly, in their opinion, a much better series. That attitude doesn't really exist. But also within the general public, there is a renewed love and respect for the show. What I'm trying to say is that sniggering behind your hands at the supposedly shaky sets and the cardboard spaceships seems to have dimmed somewhat now, and people, you don't really hear that rhetoric quite as much as you used to. People just seem to have an enormous respect for the original show now.
Well, Simon, I think the criticism used to be, and I think this is the same with all vintage movies as well as TV and entertainment, is, it's dated.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And?
But you don't hear that quite so much these days.
No, you don't. I think it's past. I think entertainment passes through a time because people are now talking about things from the 90s certainly, or the noughties. Oh, it's so dated. Have you heard that Venga Boys track from 2002? Oh, it's so dated. So that sort of moved on to that time now, and the things that are of a time from before are kind of being enjoyed, being embraced again for what they are, rather than for what they're not. And there's a sense of sort of, oh, bless them, this is the best that they could do, which is a little patronizing. But I think it's more than that. I think it's genuine affection, real appreciation, and a willingness to step back into that world, kind of warts and all, limitations and all, because without that there is no legacy, and the legacy of Doctor Who is something that does seem to keep paying back over and over and over again. And I see that reflected no better than in the readapting of Bernard Lodge's original diamond logo there from the mid-70s that we've seen put in place just before the 60th anniversary. I think that's an assertion of values and of the worth of this brand, what it's been before, what it could be again, and what it could further take on too. I think it's become fortified by this somehow, by this seal, this stamp of everything that the last 60 years has been leading to. That, if not who's to say if the best is yet to come or not, but something new is to come, and everybody's invited again. And this is a big turnaround from perhaps how other production teams in the recent past have looked at it. So there's reassurance there too, that everybody's invited and it all matters. And whichever era that you like, which you loved, or whichever that you attempted to fast forward through, or whatever, you're still a fan. Everybody's a fan if you love this show.
I think the other thing that sort of strikes me with this is, and I've thought this before now, how lucky I am, and I think, Andy, this absolutely reflects in what you're doing with this marathon at the moment, how lucky I am that my favourite television programme of all time is so accessible, so loved by so many other people, and that we are spoilt with the accessibility of the episodes, the love for it that is out there. You could have ended up falling in love with, I don't know, the new adventures of Robin Hood or something like that, that there's no love for out there, that nobody else really shares your affection for. And so that always strikes me how lucky I am to have fallen in love with this show of all shows, because if it wasn't that, Andy, you probably wouldn't be able to do what you are doing, because the episodes that you're now watching simply probably wouldn't have been as accessible as they are.
No, absolutely, and as we all know, there is so much archive television missing because there was not the love for a lot of those other programs, and a lot of them are missing in their entirety.
Right.
So yeah, we know that too well.
It's just pure coincidence that we just happen to love the program that, thank goodness, most of it was, more by luck than judgment, retained.
Yeah, and again, I think because, again, I keep dropping Ian Levine's name in, but I've got no shame in that, because of people like Ian Levine, who were the earliest of those pioneers in wanting to save. And hang on a minute, these stories that I watched as a kid, they must be still out there. I want to get hold of them. I want to see if there's any way that I can ever see them again. And it was that kind of crazy determination from people like him in the 70s that helped maintain the archive we've got today, or we'd be in a lot worse state.
Andy, I've said this before now, and I've ended up in quite heated debates with people over this very issue that we have Ian, and people like Ian, but let's be honest, Ian was the first one to highlight the fact that these things need rescuing. And
the idea that they were heritage.
Yeah, well
cultural heritage.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think, probably from Ian's point of view, I don't know, it would be almost selfishness on his part.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ian
would admit that, I'm sure, yeah. He wanted to see them, and he would do whatever it took to.
Yeah, he saw the Daleks.
But with sharing them as well. He's never kept stuff to himself. He would share.
That's right. And so, I've literally ended up, as I say, in a heated debate with people about, oh, well, yeah, but he didn't actually save them. It was Sue Malden that actually saved them. But without Ian, they wouldn't have been saved. And so, you were saying a few minutes ago, you can't believe it when you sit down and you're able to watch the Daleks. And something that I always think when I'm watching those very, very earliest of shows is, wow, we wouldn't be watching the Daleks if it wasn't for Ian Levine.
I must admit, I always give Ian a passing thought, particularly when I watch that story.
I'm forever grateful to him for that. We wouldn't be able to watch it if it hadn't been for him. So, salute him for that.
Absolutely. Doctor Who reaches its 60th anniversary on the 23rd of November 2023. Who knows what's coming our way, Andy? Aside from those 3 specials that have been confirmed, we're hearing various rumblings about other things to come before. And obviously, we know generally what's coming after: a brand new Doctor, a brand new companion. Are you looking forward to seeing Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson enter the TARDIS in a Christmas this year, Christmas 2023?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think the thing that excites me the most is Russell's T. Davies has proven over and over again what he can do. He understands not just what makes Doctor Who tick, but he understands what the public like and what will reach a wider audience, I think, and I hope. And I think that's what we've lost a bit. I don't just think maybe over the last 3 years, but maybe even over the last 6 or 7, where the audience numbers have dwindled gradually downwards.
I think they took the audience for granted a little. I think that even was happening in Stephen Moffat's time. They would always come back. But you can split the seasons. You can change the time of year, change the time of night. People will always find it. And I do think that when you do that for so long, you can only. You're bound to.
I think it became. I mean, this is just my view. I think it became more for us, the fans, and the wider public just switched off. This is no longer for me. This is being made for the fans. So the numbers got smaller and smaller over the last 6 or 7 years, I think, because of that.
But we've seen that historically all the way through the run. We've constantly seen this dipping and diving of there's always been peaks and troughs.
Yeah. But if anyone can get us back to 8 to 10 million viewers, it's Russell T Davies, because I just think he understands that he's got that finger in not just Doctor Who, but also with the general public and what people will like, and he will engage people back in the show again. So I couldn't be more delighted.
And also, I do think in the wider picture, I just think Doctor Who it is a genuinely unique thing on on world television. It is a genuinely unique product. There is nothing like it. There probably never will be anything like it. And I think that uniqueness is what is always going to carry it through. Eventually, in the darkest days of the 90s, we thought we would never ever see it back, but it did resurrect itself, and I genuinely think that is partially thanks to just the uniqueness of its nature. That people that it will never die. From that point of view, I just think it's too special a property to ever disappear.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm tempted to start my marathon watch this evening.
Go for it.
It'll probably pass, but I'll let you know how I get on. I certainly am looking at doing that in the not too distant future.
Good.
Maybe I'll start it on the 23rd of November. I don't know, but that's the old girl starting up and calling time on another edition of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast. I'll be back with another one soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40 at type40.podbean.com. Maybe we rolled up on the podcatcher of your choice. Could have been on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, which I've already said, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart Radio, TuneIn, Google Play, Amazon Music, Podbay, or the Podbean app itself. We're also on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, here on the Spacebook YouTube channel. And we're still on the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed. That's loaded up with so many treats for your ears. Never mind on the weekly. They've got it coming to you on the daily there at the FPN. If you consider a trip sideways in time, maybe you'd like to have your say on all of this, you can reach out to us through our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who. Email us, type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling particularly brave and you fancy some real-time extra-dimensional chit-chat, you can join us in the Type 40 Facebook group. Head over to Facebook, enter Type 40 enter Type 40 into the search field, and there you'll find our social media group that's full of regeneration upon regeneration's worth of Doctor Who fans, all talking about classic Doctor Who and reliving those black and white days, the 25-minute days that we were talking about earlier on, all the way through new Doctor Who there, and anticipating what's to come in all new Doctor Who with Shooter Gatwa and Millie Gibson there from next year onwards. We can hardly wait. Maybe you're the same. Andy, people can follow your quest on social media, you were saying, but do you tweet, do you gram? Where can people read more of this and maybe sort of watch along with you if they want to?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, I do have a Twitter account. It's Andy LaRock, which is, as it's spelled, Andy LaRock, ROCK. Yeah. Mainly talk about music on there, but it'd be nice to have a few Doctor Who people on there. And what you touched about wider people from the public. These people aren't Doctor Who fans that follow me on Twitter, and they're all loving my Doctor Who posts and talking about it. So it just shows you that old stigma's gone, dead and buried. And the other place, of course, I mentioned Ian Levine's got a Facebook group that he sets up so that people could have access to him and talk to him about the history of Doctor Who. And Ian asked me to be an admin on that because I used to run his Doctor Who forum many years ago. Very proud to help him with that. So I'm talking about it on Ian Levine's Facebook group as well. So thanks for.
So you're even reaching the not we with, I remember that one, or was that the one with this, or was that the one with that?
Well, I had a bizarre one the other day. I think it was when I talked about, it was the Keys of Marinus, and somebody just popped up and said, Pirate Planet, that's a good one. But it's funny, you just get people throwing things out like that, completely out of the question. Oh yeah, I'll get there in about a year and a half,
Here we are. That's the broader reach and the power of the show, that cultural resonance that stays with people, Simon, isn't it? Where can people find you on social media, Simon? You're hanging out on Facebook.
I can come and have a chat on the Whonatics page where I'm the admin on that. Come and say hello. On Facebook, that is, by the way, Facebook.
And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and groaning, ranting and raving about all things geeky, both inside and outside of the TARDIS, with a little bit of real life thrown in there now and again. When the mood takes me, when I absolutely have to come back to reality, that's what's going on there. Andy, we'd love to have you back at some point in the future. Maybe a progress report on how you're getting on.
Absolutely. Yeah, give me a shout. You know where I am. Love to.
on how you're getting on with all this. But yeah, the very best of luck. I do hope that you enjoy it as much as you have on the earlier marathons, and yeah, you find something new in these classic adventures and the new stuff too. But yeah, you've been great company. So thanks for your time, and thanks to everybody out there for watching, and thanks for listening. Leave us some questions maybe for Andy in the comments section, and I'm sure we'll pass them on to him. He'll come and answer them for you, and any of those little sort of geeky nuggets and little personal things about any marathons that you may have done, or maybe you're thinking of doing them too, just like I am after this edition of the show. But yeah, that's it for this time. Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks for listening. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40. We'll speak to you all again soon. You take care. Bye-bye.